On a particularly sunny day in Bordertown, Margaret is enjoying some cold ice cream while giving a shout out to the prince for his brilliant strategy that has shaken things up in Grey Castle. Because of this, Timothy has repeatedly failed to take down Bordertown. She further shares that she's heard rumors about the Black Flag fleet raiding Seabreeze Town and Goldenwheat City before sailing to the north, and no one has any clue where Garcia went with her Black Flag fleet. Since Garcia is now out of the picture, this means that Timothy's only target left is our boy. She enthusiastically offers that if the prince wants to leave Grey Castle, the Bay is ready to welcome him with open arms. There's enough land on their island to even set up 10 border towns, and she and the other merchants would be more than happy to provide all the land available to border town citizens. The prince, though, already knows where Margaret is coming from. He's not about to trade his steam engine and paddle steamer blueprints with the merchants like that. Even if he lost to Timothy and ended up losing Grey Castle, he'd prefer to head to his sister Tilly Wimbledon first. Margaret then asks the prince about the hot air balloons, and he reveals that he's already working on them. He's managed to manufacture 2 so far, but he points out that they're not quite like the ones she's ridden before, and they don't require a witch to operate either. When they head outside, the prince shows her one of the balloons they've created. He explains that it has a port at the end for loading gas, which is what makes it fly. Refilling is pretty straightforward, because all you have to do is just connect the hose to the tank and twist it open. He also mentions that the balloon is resistant to rain, fire, and even bird beaks. Margaret is amazed about all this, but curiously asks how many gas tanks each balloon needs. The prince tells her it's about 5 or 6. Margaret then inquires if the gas is very expensive, and the prince pretends it is, saying that gas isn't something just anyone can produce. But deep down, Prince Roland is practically doing a happy dance because, contrary to what he said, making helium is a breeze. All it takes is mixing sulfuric acid with reactive metal in the tank. And since he doesn't have any metals on hand, he can simply get help from Sister Lucia to extract high-purity metal for the reaction. Meanwhile, Margaret acknowledges that the formula must have come from the blood, sweat, and tears of Bordertown's esteemed alchemists, who worked tirelessly to make it happen. So, without a second thought, she decides to buy some. The prince then humbly reminds her that the canisters can only be stored for a year and must not be incinerated, struck, or disassembled, or there will be severe consequences. He adds that while it might be a little expensive, Bordertown will offer deals and discounts for their customers. That's when lightning chimes in, announcing that the balloons will come with pre-filled complimentary gas, a camouflage cloak, and a warranty. Customers can also purchase a yearly membership subscription for additional discounts. A while later, Prince Roland is feeling pretty pleased with himself. The deals he struck with Margaret have generated a lot of revenue, which means he can now invest in boosting the population. By the time he builds the city next year, he is sure that the Redwater River will be lined with neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Anna and Lucia are hard at work. Anna perks up when she sees the prince strolling toward them, and the prince quickly squats down after approaching them, asking how things are going and if they found anything worthwhile. It seems like Anna and Lucia are focused on producing a metal with incredible resilience, hardness, and tenacity. Lucia dives into some technical details, and overall, they're quite satisfied with their results. Anna even mentions that this project is more interesting than smelting musket barrels. She further happily reveals that she can completely transform an iron block by adding another metal to it, and she's eager to understand how these metallic atoms bond together. The prince is thrilled to hear this, and explains to us that Anna and Lucia are working on an extraordinarily useful task. Lucia's job is to break down ores into different base elements, while Anna melds them with iron to test their qualities. Using Blackfire's malleability, Anna tests the hardness and tenacity with varying amounts of magic. As the prince walks away, he's buried in a book about chemistry, detailing everything about iron and its properties. He knows that even tiny changes can cause significant shifts in a metal's properties, which is why they're testing those thresholds. A while later, the prince is sitting on a bench, and the falling leaves are a clear sign that autumn is approaching. As the prince starts dozing off, Anna jolts him awake with a tap on his nose, telling him not to fall asleep outside, otherwise he is going to catch a cold. He suddenly asks where Lucia is, and Anna reveals that she's having afternoon tea with Belle. Just then, Anna reads Roland's troubled face, so she moves in close and asks if he has something on his mind, because she can see it in his eyes. The prince remains silent for a moment, then grabs her hand and pulls her closer, admitting that he's feeling a little troubled about something. He explains that he had brought the commoners in the border town from the capital with the help of everyone, but there are still a lot more people stuck in the capital who are not willing to leave the capital. The time is running out, so he is afraid that he has to be more forceful to ensure he saves most of the people, and they don't fall victims of Church's pills Timothy is making them to take. Reflecting on it, he admits that, in a way, he's more or less the same as Timothy, with the only difference being their goals. He wants people because he's aiming to build his empire, While Timothy wants people just to crush everyone, Anna quickly puts a finger over his lips and tells him she gets what he's trying to say. She explains that she's figured out what's troubling him. He's worried that people might not accept his help, that his goals might not always match up with what others expect, and that using harsh tactics, even for a good cause, could be misunderstood. The prince isn't sure if having a moral goal outweighs using a moral method. Anna reassures him not to worry, telling him she will always be there to help him no matter what. The next scene then takes us to the sea at the fjords on Slumber Island. There, we see a boat docked at the shore with different vendors selling their wares. Molly and another cute witch can be seen exploring the market area. All the while, Princess Tilly is observing everything through her telescope. She notes how Slumber Island is no longer just a hiding place for the original 300 witches. Although the new Bay residents live on the outer edges of the island, far from where the witches live, she's confident that with continued growth, Slumber Island will eventually become a city. As Tilly is discussing these developments to herself, Ash calls out to her, warning her about the heavy wind and telling her to come down before she trips. Tilly quickly uses the stone embedded in her hand to lift off from her perch, and smoothly makes her way down. Ash scolds Tilly for being reckless and suggests she keep Molly around while she's experimenting with flying. On the other hand, Tilly excitedly talks about her new discovery, explaining that as long as she maintains her magic output, she won't fall off. However, controlling her direction is still tricky. She invites Ash to give it a try, saying flying is an incredible experience, and the view of Slumber Island from above is breathtaking. Ash remains dubious and flatly refuses, reminding Tilly that she couldn't even activate the lightning stone and that she shouldn't risk her life. Besides, there's only one stone, so she can't fly with her even if she mastered it. Tilly sadly agrees and mentions she's also working on figuring out how to craft more of these stones. Ash asks if she's implying that the stones are man-made. Tilly confirms, saying their appearance and qualities seem unnatural, suggesting that the people who built the ruins had a deep understanding of magic, and she finds it a bit sad that the makers of these stones didn't leave any research literature about any of it. Suddenly, Maggie comes rushing at Princess Tilly, looking as if she's seen a ghost. When Ash notices the frantic bird making a speedy descent, she quickly grips Tilly and steps aside, clearing the way. Poor Maggie lands hard on the solid ground and for a moment seems genuinely hurt. Ash picks her up, and Maggie explains that she was blown away when she saw Tilly flying. She even thought for a moment that Sister Lightning had come to Slumber Island without telling anyone. Once Maggie recovers, she mentions that she's just come directly from Border Town, and Tilly then asks how the witches there are doing. Maggie replies that they're doing great, and that she was asked to deliver a bunch of letters written by them. One letter is from Lotus, and the other one from Evelyn, and as well as Sylvie also sent a letter. She also pleasantly presents a letter from the prince as well. Ash then offers Maggie a cookie for a job well done, and Maggie happily transforms into her little chubby pigeon form and flies off with the treat. Tilly can't help but notice how Maggie seems to get plumper with each trip to Border Town. Nonetheless, as they walk away, Tilly notices that Roland's letter feels unusually heavy this time, making her wonder what's inside. Later, once they're in the office, she eagerly opens the letter and finds a bunch of pictures inside. She's blown away by the lifelike drawings, convinced that only magic could create such detailed images, and one of the witches must have done this. But that's not even the craziest part. As she reads the letter, Tilly is further shocked to realize that these are real pictures of devils, not just some random art. Apparently, the scenes depicted are from when the Witch Association ventured into the Badlands to find the Holy Mountain. It then starts to ring a bell for Ash, and she recalls the legend of the Holy Mountain, said to be a legendary witch sanctuary where true peace and quiet could be achieved. However, Ash realizes that this was likely just hot air. They could simply live peacefully on Slumber Island without the worries of the outside world. The letter reveals that Kara, the former leader of the Witch Association, truly believed in the Holy Mountain's existence. She had found an ancient book in the eastern ruins that led her to believe the mountain was located in the Forsaken Lands. So she took the association past the mountains into the wastelands, but they discovered nothing but horrifying monsters. The letter describes these monsters as having incredible strength, quick mobility, and some even wielding lightning magic, just like a witch would. Out of 40 witches, only 6 survived, and they eventually found shelter in Border Town. It wouldn't be surprising if those devils were using the same lightning stones which Princess Tilly has right now. The prince's letter goes on to mention something puzzling as well. Apparently, there's a scribble at the end in the language of the 4 kingdoms. It references the Holy City, a battle with devils, and Alice's experiment with the Divine Punishment Army from 400 years ago. The prince has yet to figure out as to why this would be written in such a different language. After finishing the mysterious letter from the prince, Tilly decides to read Sylvie's letter next. Sylvie's letter reveals that she hasn't detected any disguises or traces of magic related to Roland Wimbledon. There are no other witches in Border Town who might be controlling the prince, which means that Prince Roland is truly her brother. The news absolutely shocks Tilly, and she's left trying to make sense of how it's even possible. She remembers that Gerald, Timothy, and Garcia were her father's first children, and they had formed a tight clique because of this very reason. Even Garcia, the youngest among them, was 6 years older than Roland. So, no one hung out with him and bullied him relentlessly. Logically, since Tilly was the youngest, she should have teamed up with Roland. But for some obvious reasons, that didn't happen. Roland's personality got pretty twisted because of the way his siblings treated him, and he was carrying a lot of frustration he couldn't dump on his older siblings, so Tilly ended up being his target. She explains that their father stepped in once he found out, and Roland did shape up a bit. Still, he was full of mischief. He was both immature and kind of funny, so she had to stand up to him, and he didn't bother her much after that. Not gonna lie, little Roland was pretty charming back then. Tilly further reveals that as Roland grew up, he didn't really change much. According to rumors, he was hot-tempered, uneducated, and relied solely on his royal status. Those traits were just a cover for his true weaknesses, fear and fragility. Yet now he's standing with the witches, protecting them despite being seen as demons, and he's even willing to go against the church. She is having a hard time believing it, and Ash agrees. She says that even though she hadn't seen Roland in years, he seemed like a completely different person now. Apart from his appearance, he gives off a totally different vibe. Tilly then curiously asks Ash for her observations further. Ash explains that the biggest change is Roland's cleanliness. Both his appearance and his presence are simple and refined. He doesn't flaunt his status like other elites, and if it weren't for his hair, he might not stand out from an ordinary commoner at all. Ash adds that while Roland might seem normal, there's something about him she can't quite put into words, and he gives off a really nice feeling. The princess smiles and teasingly points out that she never expected Ash, of all people, to give Roland a compliment. Ash quickly gets flustered and insists she's just being honest. Nevertheless, Tilly is still curious, and wonders what could have caused such a drastic change in Roland. She suspects he might have used some means to become someone else, and the only way to find out is to meet him face to face. I love how this manhwa is putting so much emphasis on Roland's transformation. It's a refreshing change from other manhwa that often make you forget the main character doesn't belong in their current world. Sylvie further writes that she has mostly been exploring the northern mines for the prince. To everyone's surprise, they've discovered a huge amount of divine judgment stones. These stones grow out of the ground just like other ores. She's also seen soldiers at the border town using a type of metal weapon that shoots iron balls and bolts. The weapon is incredibly powerful and makes a thunderous sound, and she has even made some drawings of these weapons. Ash quickly perks up and points out that this rod-like weapon is exactly what caused her injury back then. Since they're allies now, she advises Princess Tilly to request a shipment of these weapons for defense. If the prince refuses, it would suggest he's not as reliable as everyone thinks. Princess Tilly responds that, first of all, they are not particularly defenseless, and secondly, those weapons are clearly vital to the prince, so he wouldn't give them away easily. Tilly is sure that making demands like that would only break their trust. Besides, she plans to visit Bordertown during the winter anyway, so it'll be easier to talk to him in person about it. Ash quickly agrees, saying that Tilly can handle things however she sees fit. As Tilly continues reading the letter, she notices that Sylvie's sharp eyes missed nothing, because the letter even describes Roland's gifts to the witches, and Tilly gets absolutely blushy and embarrassed when she reads about how the prince gifted some underwear meant to cover a woman's chest, specifically for the adult witches. Tilly finds it completely ridiculous, thinking that gifting underwear is something only lovers do. So how could Roland have done that? She then recalls that he did something similar at the capital, and realizes that he's definitely started to resemble the Roland she used to know. Ash nods in agreement, noting that Roland was always a bit of a creep, so she tells Tilly they shouldn't go to Bordertown during the winter. Back at Bordertown, the chemist Sichi is in high spirits as he shares some exciting news with the prince. He's found a workable solution for manufacturing acid, but it requires a large amount of lead and a skilled smith to make a container out of it. He's heard that there's a witch who can precisely cut metal, and if she can handle the metal work, he asks for permission to use her assistance. The prince gives the green light for the witch's help, but mentions that he actually called him for something other than the acid. But Sichi is already way too busy with his current projects to get time for anything else. The prince reassures him that it won't take long and that all he needs is a few of Sichi's apprentices, not his top-tier ones. Sichi is finally curious and asks what the task involves. The prince then explains that they're going to manufacture soap, specifically for the common market. Despite its modest appearance, it will have the same properties as luxury soap, useful for bathing, washing clothes, and cleaning kitchenware. Sichi then frantically asks if the prince is referring to saponification, the process from Chemistry 101 that converts fats and sodium hydroxide into glycerin and soap. The prince confirms, and he seems pretty happy that Sichi is using the correct chemistry terms. However, even though Mad Scientist is thrilled about it, he still suggests delaying soap production because citizens can go days without bathing and usually clean their clothes and dishes in the river. The prince clarifies that soap production indeed has the lowest priority right now, but it's the byproduct that they desperately need. Sichi then asks if the prince is talking about glycerin, and the prince agrees, stating that producing glycerin is their top priority. Eventually, Sichi agrees to the plan, but points out that he won't have the time to handle it himself. The prince understands and mentions that he has some spicy intel that might interest him. Apparently, a sailboat carrying 50 commoners arrived this morning. Since there were a lot of people and they didn't seem like merchants, they were stopped by patrol. One of these commoners asked for Sichi, and it turns out that newcomer is an alchemist from Redwater City. Before the prince can reveal this newcomer's name, Sichi jumps with excitement, quickly realizing that this must be Charles, his former disciple. He's certain Charles has brought apprentices to assist him, and eagerly asks where Charles is right now, explaining that he was his most productive disciple, and it's crucial for the work. The prince informs him that they are registering themselves at the city hall. In the next scene, Lightning and Maggie are getting ready for their adventure, double-checking their supplies. Maggie proudly pulls out a string of sausages and declares that she's all set for the journey. Lightning raises an eyebrow and tells her that sausages won't do much against the dangers they might face, so she should grab a weapon or something. But the little pigeon makes it clear that if she runs into any Divine Judgment soldiers, she'll peck through their armor. Knowing arguing with Maggie is a lost cause, Lightning just puts on her glasses and they are ready to set off towards the westernmost point of the misty forest, and their goal is to explore the area and map out the forest's boundaries. As they head out, Lightning feels a wave of relief that Maggie is coming along. She's uneasy about exploring the misty forest alone, especially after encountering that devil in the woods at her last visit. She worries that if Maggie knew just how scared she is, she might poke fun at her. Lightning reflects on the wisdom of her father, who is the great adventurer. He had once told her that no matter what obstacles she faces, she must confront them bravely, observe closely, and understand that fear often comes from within rather than from the actual danger. With these words in mind, Lightning steels herself, declaring proudly that she's the daughter of her father and she won't be defeated. They continue their journey. Lightning finds it quite reassuring that they can simply just follow the river to not get lost. Suddenly, Maggie spots a towering mountain at the end of the forest. The mountain's sheer size makes it look almost mythical. They notice a deep, dark hole in the mountain and decide to dive into it further to investigate. Once they are inside, Lightning notices the black rocks scattered around in the area. Maggie even pokes at one of the rocks and reports that they don't seem edible. Lightning checks out the rocks and realizes there's some kind of ore. Since they don't know much about it, they decide to bring the rocks back to the prince for analysis. Lightning then mentions that they spent most of the morning getting here, which means this place is around 240 kilometers away from the border town, much farther than Longsong Fortress. Suddenly she gets curious and wonders what's beyond this huge mountain. Meanwhile, Maggie notices her feathers starting to turn black. Well, I would not be surprised if this place is a gold mine of coal. Nevertheless, Lightning decides to check out the other side of the mountain, so she tells Maggie to stay put and not move. She dashes out of the tunnel and starts flying diagonally towards the sea to see what's beyond the mountain. When she finally reaches the end of the mountain and looks around, she's absolutely shocked by what she sees. Later, the scene cuts back to the border town where the prince is studying a map of Grey Castle's royal palace, and he is busy planning his siege. Suddenly he hears a loud thumping noise. It's Maggie and Lightning peeking through the window, with Lightning looking particularly scared and anxious. The prince quickly tells Nightingale to open the window. Once they're inside, Lightning jumps at the prince, and he in return gives her a reassuring pat on the head, telling her to calm down and asking what happened. Maggie quickly starts flapping her wings and reveals that she saw black rocks and huge snowy mountains. But that is not what has Lightning so worried, because what really scared her were the devils she saw there. As she tries to explain, she's visibly anxious, so the prince tells her to calm down and steady herself before speaking again. The little adventurer finally takes a chill pill and reveals that in order to completely mark the misty forest, she headed west along the Redwater River and found a huge mountain there. Behind it, she saw a red mist that covered the entire range, and the mist had crimson blood-like color. It was hard to see through it, but it reminded her of Soraya's drawings, and she's certain that the red mist is the kind that the devils need to survive. A while later, Lady Scroll and other witches pay a visit to the prince. Seems like Roland has filled in all of the witches about the discovery of these devils. In the light of all this, Lady Scroll suggests that they should conduct an investigation of the red mist area. She points out that Lightning only saw it from afar and couldn't confirm if there were actually devils in the mist. Plus, even if they do find devils, they'll need to figure out if those monsters can reach the kingdom from the mountains. Wendy agrees with the Sister Scroll's recommendation, and further adds that while everyone knows that the devils are powerful, they are still not sure what defensive measures to take against them, so to prepare in advance, they need to investigate these monsters firsthand. The prince also agrees with the point they have raised, and asks if anyone has any objections. If not, he's ready to move forward with the plan. However, the prince isn't sure how to conduct the investigation safely. That's when Anna suggests using hot air balloons. She explains that they can paint the balloons to blend in with the sky and use the clouds as cover. They'll fly over the ocean as an additional safety measure. Lightning then suggests bringing Sylvie along since her abilities are perfect for a scouting mission like this. The prince agrees and decides that he'll join the expedition as well. However, Nightingale quickly voices her concern, insisting that the prince shouldn't risk his life, and it seems like other witches are also against the idea of the prince tagging along. The prince then clarifies that this isn't as risky as it seems. He explains that if the monsters could fly or scale mountains, they would have already spread across all 4 kingdoms. The fact that they're still confined to the westernmost region suggests they're not as dangerous as everyone fears. Besides, the prince thinks to himself that he has more knowledge about alien civilizations and stuff, and he can easily figure out how advanced they are just at first glance. So, if he can see the devils and their city himself, it could be extremely helpful in figuring out how to defend against them. With that in mind, he tells everyone to calm down, assuring them that they'll be watching from a safe distance. He adds that if even scouting from afar was too dangerous, he would never have agreed to this expedition in the first place. Nightingale finally agrees, though she seems a bit embarrassed for overreacting earlier, and she still insists that the prince isn't allowed to stray from the group during their journey. The prince agrees and points out that Anna, Wendy, Soraya, Sylvie, Nightingale, Lightning, and Maggie will all be going. He tells them they'll leave in a week and advises everyone to carry revolvers along with the necessary rations. He also tells them to practice with the revolvers in the meantime so that even the non-combative witches can defend themselves. The prince then decides to take a look at the ore Lightning has brought back. The little adventurer quickly reports that there were more of these rocks near the mountain, and the area covered by them is 10 times bigger than the border town. The prince notices that the rock is lighter than typical ores, so it's definitely not a metal or regular ore. Since it's black and found at ground level, it could be coal. He tells Anna to burn the rock a little, and once her green flame touches it, the rock begins to burn with a blue fire. It doesn't take long for the prince to recognize that this is high-quality anthracite, a type of coal that burns with minimal smoke. Lightning is surprised that this is what coal looks like because she expected it to be brittle and dirty like charcoal. The prince explains that this coal has been broken down and refined. Most coal looks like rocks in its basic form, and higher quality coal, like anthracite, is harder and shiny on the outside. He adds that coal isn't rare in Grey Castle because Fallen Dragon Ridge and Silver City both export it. It's primarily used for warmth, but this thing can easily replace charcoal in smithing, which is more environmentally friendly because it means fewer trees need to be cut down. He thinks to himself that even if they transition to electricity and gas, coal remains a versatile and cheap fuel source. It can be used to manufacture coal gas, hydrogen, and asphalt, and even generate electricity. Therefore, establishing an open-air coal mine would be more advantageous than relying on imports. It looks like they'll need to produce more steamboats and a coal factory in the westernmost region in order to ship all of the coal into the border town. The scene cuts to the king's city, where inside the palace, an alchemist demonstrates their new discovery, which is a combustive snow powder created by the Alchemists Association. When the explosion goes off, the brass bowl goes flying into the air, leaving Timothy utterly flabbergasted. The old alchemist explains that if they increase the quantity and pack it tightly, the powder could be powerful enough to shred armor and flesh. Timothy is thrilled to hear this, and gladly offers the old man a generous reward of 20 golden royals. He instructs him to start building a snow powder factory in the capital immediately, and to continue researching the powder. He promises that if its effects in battle are as impressive as claimed, he'll grant the alchemist a dukeship and territory. The old man bows in respect, but one of the knights in the chamber points out that while the invention looks promising on paper, it might not be very useful on the battlefield, because it requires a fuse and has limited lethality, affecting only a half a pace wide area. Timothy is deeply troubled after getting reminded that this powder still needs innovation. He reflects bitterly that if it weren't for Garcia snatching the alchemists who were in charge of researching the snow powder, he would have already dominated Grey Castle. But still, he's relieved that the remaining alchemists were skilled enough to sniff out the recipe. Suddenly, a soldier bursts in with urgent news and reports that the troops sent to the western region have been wiped out and returned to the capital in defeat, each carrying a letter from Roland Wimbledon. Timothy reads the letter and sees that Roland is clearly disappointed with his strategies. Roland calls the attack on the western region a severe mistake and warns that he'll make Timothy pay for it. He also says he'll attack the capital in the second month of autumn, planning to show that Timothy's throne isn't as safe as he thinks. Timothy is absolutely livid after reading the letter, his anger practically boiling over. Back with the witches, they're all geared up with revolvers for their shooting practice, and the prince is eager to see how they perform. As the ladies start shooting, it quickly becomes clear that they're struggling. Their shots are going in every direction except toward the target. Roland's enthusiasm dies down and starts to feel hopeless about their lackluster skills. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because Anna stands out among everyone by hitting the target with such finesse you would not believe. The other witches are fascinated to see this, and even the prince is bewildered by her performance. He notices her clean aim and steady posture, and wonders if Anna has talent beyond just her knowledge. Despite the revolver's noticeable recoil, her arm remains perfectly steady, leaving the prince impressed and curious about her hidden abilities. Meanwhile, Anna is basking in her glory after hitting the target perfectly. However, the prince quickly notices something off, and we can also see a hint of magic at play near the trigger of her gun. With a suspicious look in his eyes, he leans toward Anna and scolds her, saying that no one is allowed to use their abilities during firing practice. The clueless Anna asks why, and the prince explains that if enemies have stones of divine judgment, she would be helpless without her magic. He wants everyone to be prepared for real combat situations where their magical abilities might not be available. Prince then covers her ears and tells her to try again, assuring her that she won't feel scared this time. Lightning quickly asks Maggie to come over and cover her ears too. I find it fascinating how even the kids are handling these guns like they're just water pistols. With her ears covered, Anna quickly fires a barrage of bullets, and they all hit the target perfectly. Seeing this, Wendy and Nightingale give it a go as well, and soon enough the girls are having a blast while shooting. Later, we see their balloon floating in the air, camouflaged to blend with the sky. The prince announces that they'll be practicing dropping projectiles from the sky and plans to attack the capital in the second month of autumn, so everyone needs to start practicing right away. Wendy could not help but feel thrilled to be so high in the sky, and points out how the entire western region looks as small as the palm of her hand. The prince, however, explains that the area is indeed not very large, and directs her attention to the wasteland to the north, which is where they'll need to go later. Lightning notices they're already quite high, and comments that she can't see anything below. The prince says they are high enough, and inside the balloon basket, we see a nuke-like bomb. He explains that they'll be practicing by dropping this fake bomb, just like they did on the ground. He adds that since this is only an experiment, the bomb they're using is much smaller than the real ones and weighs about as much as 4 nightingales. Even though this one is smaller in size, they still need to treat it seriously. Anna seems really curious after hearing about the weight of this bomb, and curiously asks the prince since when Nightingale became a unit of measurement. The prince dramatically coughs and tells her not to worry about the details, instructing her to just get started. They drop their first bomb, and Anna quickly shuts the downward door in the basket. The prince is happy to see that they've become so familiar with the procedure after all their training. Wendy then asks him if the bomb can really hit the target from this altitude. Roland admits that it does seem improbable, considering they're dropping it from 1,000 meters. However, he explains that the bomb has exceptional navigation capabilities, and its high altitude actually contributes to its guaranteed accuracy, and this is all thanks to our little explorer, Lightning. We're back at the border town castle. When the prince mentions he's heading to the Misty Forest, Knight Carter, Iron Axe, and the old man Barov are all shocked to hear this. The knight even insists on accompanying the prince as his first knight to protect him, while Iron Axe wants to bring 100 men to keep the prince safe. On the other hand, Old Man Barov says he has a ton of paperwork to handle. The prince firmly states that this is an order for everyone, and they need to stay and manage the border town while he's away. It seems like Barov isn't fully aware about the devils and the red mist in the most western region, so he curiously asks what's so important about that area that the prince feels the need to go himself. The prince doesn't get into details but says the situation affects the entire western region and could even threaten the destruction of Grey Castle. He claims that he is the only one who can assess it firsthand and insists he must go himself. Knight Carter asks if the prince can spill the exact reason for his visit. The prince says he can't say right now but promises he'll fill them in eventually. He makes it clear that it's a secret mission and everyone needs to keep it to themselves. As everyone's freaking out about the bombshell the prince just dropped, he reflects on the situation in his mind. The Devil Territory is 60 miles from the western region, and these monsters once destroyed the holy city of Tequila, driving survivors to the edge of the continent. It all sounds pretty outlandish, but the prince is glad he's seen plenty of apocalyptic movies. But he knows that people won't easily accept this reality. If word leaks and civilians panic, everyone might rush to leave the western region, and he can't let that happen after coming this far. So, the prince finally sets off with all the witches in their balloon, waving a final goodbye to his loyal companions, who are tearfully watching him depart. Not gonna lie, I'm also super excited to see what they're about to run into in that mist. Meanwhile, as they're floating through the air, Sylvie asks if the church fought the devils 400 years ago, and wonders if that makes the church good. The prince says the church is actually evil, and Nightingale agrees, pointing out that if they were good, they wouldn't have been executing witches for no reason. She explains it would be one thing if the witches were actually evil, but they're not connected to devils at all, plus there's even evidence to disprove that. The prince agrees and adds that first they need to verify if the church really did fight the devils. If they did, why would they hide it and destroy all the evidence? Because they could have gained a lot of followers by spreading the news of their victory. The prince reassures Sylvie that he'll never support the church just because they fought the devils. He's determined to fight against the devils on his own if needed, and he's not afraid because he has witches by his side. Nightingale leans in, happily reminding Sylvie that the church is a bunch of losers who failed to eradicate the devils in the past, so the prince would never side with them. A while later, Lightning points out that they're almost there and can already see the mountain. When everyone in the balloon looks ahead, they're awestruck by the mountain's magnificence. Wendy even notes that these mountains like they just sprang up from the ground out of nowhere. The prince then says they'll set up camp by the mountains closer to the coast, because they'll rest today and start their investigation tomorrow. Once they set up camp near the sea, the prince looks out at the endless expanse of water and thinks it's a good spot, because this wide area makes it easy to spot anything around them, far from the misty forest, and unlikely for animals to come near. The ladies come over and suggest that the prince should sleep inside the tent. That is when Roland remembers that particular day when he tried to sleep among the ladies but had to spend his entire night restlessly. To avoid repeating the same mistake twice, he decides to sleep outside to stay fresh for their morning investigation. Meanwhile, Maggie is also feeling quite happy as she decides to sleep outside as well. The ladies start heading into the tent, and Wendy says she'll swap for lookout later. As the fire crackles and the prince sits alone, Anna approaches him from behind. The prince asks her if she's not planning to sleep with the others. She replies with no, and says she just wants to stay out here with him. She sits down beside him and mentions that Sylvie should have thanked him earlier for how he comforted her. Then, almost out of nowhere, Anna says she's happy with the choice she made. The prince finds himself confused, and curiously asks what choice she's talking about, but instead of answering, Anna leans in and gives him a quick kiss on the cheek. Afterwards, she doesn't say anything else, just wishes him good night and heads off to sleep. While he still has not recovered from that unexpected kiss, the prince is caught off guard when Nightingale suddenly appears and gives him a smooch on the cheek too. She thanks him for everything he's done for the witches, then vanishes into thin air, leaving the prince smiling to himself. The next morning, the crew is back in the balloon, and they continue their journey to the red mist. Inside the balloon, the prince can be seen still yawning, feeling a bit uncomfortable from sleeping outside. He's already starting to miss the comforts of his castle, especially the running water and showers. Meanwhile, the witches are full of energy and in high spirits, and the prince can't help but marvel at how fresh they look, and wonders if their beauty is part of their magic. Suddenly, Lightning reports that they should be able to see the blood mist from a distance. She quickly points her finger out in that particular direction, and as they peer downward, they spot the entire area swarming with that creepy red mist. Sylvie wastes no time activating her ability, and she quickly reports that they're still too far away from the mist, because she just can't detect anything from this distance. The prince decides to descend further and tells Soraya to make sure she draws every scene from this point onward. As he looks through the binoculars at the coast, he notices there are no piers or docks. Even if there were devils, they haven't built any ships to reach Grey Castle from the sea. Suddenly, Sylvie speaks up, saying that about 10 miles from the coast, in the red mist, there are some structures made of black rock. They're triangular in shape and seem to point upward. Wendy quickly chimes in, noting that these structures sound similar to the mirages they saw in the wastelands, which suggests this place is definitely devil territory. However, Soraya, who's seen devils in their buildings in the wastelands before, points out that the height of these towers seems off. The towers she saw in the mirage were so tall that they should have been visible above the mist, because they were even taller than these mountains. The prince then speculates that what she saw before might have been a devil city, and this could just be a village. While Wendy and Anna are freaking out in the background, the prince keeps his cool and asks what's inside the towers. Sylvie reports that most of them are empty, but some are filled with some kind of liquid. Suddenly she notices creepy red eyes glaring back at her. The prince snaps her out of it, asking urgently what's happening. Sylvie doesn't waste a second before telling the prince they need to get out of there fast, because the devils have already found them. Scratch that, the devils are already on the move. She explains that they were buried underground, with only the pipes on their backs sticking out of the ground. The shit is about to get real, and it's clear they need to get out before things get worse. Sylvie then drops another brutal piece of news, revealing that there are some devils flying, which leaves everyone absolutely boggled out of their minds. The prince quickly orders Wendy to retreat the balloon at full throttle, and our wind girl quickly pushes the balloon forward with her wind powers. But unfortunately, Sylvie reports that 2 devils are rapidly approaching, and they are riding some kind of flying monsters. The prince is blown away to hear this, but instead of feeling terrified, he is kind of curious about these monsters, so he squints his eyes and notices that these devils are apparently riding some hybrid demon beasts. He makes a split-second decision and shouts for everyone to lower the balloon's altitude and reach the ground as soon as possible. He knows that with only lightning capable of flying, it won't be enough to protect everyone if these monsters catch up. If the balloon gets damaged, they're all in serious trouble, and he is kicking himself for underestimating the devils and putting everyone into this risky mess. Before they can even start their descent, the flying monsters close in fast. One of them blocks their path and throws a spear with incredible speed straight at the prince. He braces himself to get screwed, but just in time, Anna conjures a shield to protect him, stopping the javelin inches from hitting him. However, it looks like Anna poured every ounce of her magic energy into creating that shield, and is almost out of juice. While the javelin falls back, the devils don't let up, and they charge at the balloon once again, surrounding the party from both sides. Surprisingly, Anna is still hanging in there, and conjures up the shield once again to keep the monsters at bay. The prince takes this chance, and immediately reminds the ladies that it's finally time to put their bad boys into action. The ladies quickly comply with command, and draw their revolvers right away. They start shooting like there's no tomorrow, with Nightingale even holding 2 revolvers like she's some kind of gunslinger reincarnate. But despite their best efforts, it looks like all those bullets are missing the target, and the monsters are closing in fast. Nightingale then points out that the balloon's shaking too much, which is messing up their aim. Just then, one of the wild beasts roars with its gross, gaping mouth, and Wendy quickly uses her wind powers to fly the balloon away. The abrupt push by Wendy causes the balloon to shake violently, making everyone in the basket lose their balance. Out of nowhere, Anna spots another monster right in front of her. This one grabs a javelin from its back and chucks it straight at her. But Prince Roland, being the hero he is, jumps in front of her and takes the spear right in his shoulder, and the impact shatters his arm in one go, leaving him crashing to the ground. The gruesome sight shatters Nightingale's heart, and for the first time I see her crying. All the witches rush to Prince Roland, and Nightingale calls out to him, but he doesn't respond. It looks like he's gone unconscious after losing a lot of blood. Nightingale sobs uncontrollably, while her tears stream down her face. Without wasting any time, Anna springs into action, quickly starting to burn the stump of the prince's severed arm to stop the bleeding. It seems like she picked up this first aid trick from one of the classes about first aid rescue, and not surprisingly, the bleeding stops right away, leaving Nightingale absolutely shocked. She quickly points out that this is their chance to get back to the border town if they want to save the prince. But this is not going to be that easy as it seems, because these devils are still looming large, and Nightingale realizes they won't make it back to the border town if they can't defeat these monsters. So she makes a split-second decision, and tells Lightning to protect the balloon from damage. The girl is startled to hear this for a second as how she is going to stray those devils away, but when she looks at the prince she realizes that they does not have time to be scared, so she quickly flies off into the air, and one of the devils quickly starts chasing her down, while there is still one devil who is trying to poke a hole into the balloon. The monster quickly backs away, and Wendy points out that it must be gearing up for a dive attack. That's when Nightingale steps up, deciding to leap off the balloon to get closer to the devils. Her friends try to talk her out of it, but with the devil charging at the balloon, she doesn't have much choice. Eventually, she jumps from the basket and lands on top of the balloon. She then uses her mist powers, and although she notices there's magic inside the devils, there's no time to dwell on it. She reappears from her mist and lands right on top of the monster's head. With her gun barrel aimed precisely at the monster's skull, she tells it to die and pulls the trigger, and the shot lands a brutal headshot, taking down the monster in one hit. The creature that the devil was riding begins to crash down, and Nightingale also starts to fall along with it. She tries to slip into the mist while plummeting through the air, but without anything to anchor her, the attempt fails miserably. Wendy tries to catch her with her wind powers, but her efforts fall short as well, and Nightingale starts to fear that she might actually die here. As she falls, memories of her past life with the prince flash before her eyes. Her dream of a sweet life alongside him begins to shatter. Despite the terrifying situation, she tears up but also wears a faint, bittersweet smile, and finally admits to herself that she might never be with the prince after all. Well, it turns out that dramatic scene was just a teaser because, let's be real, we all knew Nightingale wasn't going anywhere, especially since Maggie is finally here to save the day. With some serious plot armor at play, Maggie starts evolving right before our eyes, turning into one of those hybrid monsters herself. She quickly snatches Nightingale from mid-air. Because let's face it, no one's writing this series without her. Because she is one of the original witches after all. Maggie then flings Nightingale upward, and she lands safely on Maggie's back. Nightingale finds herself bewildered by Maggie's new hybrid form and asks her what the heck is going on. Maggie responds in a language Nightingale doesn't understand, so she simply tells our demonic bird to head back to the balloon. With that, the newly demonic Maggie starts her ascent towards the balloon. As one of the monsters spots them coming, it quickly grabs a javelin and throws it down with impressive speed. But before the javelin can hit, Maggie quickly transforms back into her little pigeon self. The javelin zooms past harmlessly, and Maggie then reverts to her monstrous form just in time to continue the rescue. As they charge straight at the monster, it's also coming at them full throttle. When they're finally face to face, Nightingale leaps off Maggie's back and dives into her misty world. She reappears right behind the devil's head, presses her gun barrel against it, and blows the monster's head off in one shot. She quickly pops back onto Maggie's back. Even though the devil's dead, its flying monster companion is still very much alive. The beast lets out a terrifying roar, but it's quickly silenced by a bullet that tears through its gaping mouth, leaving a hole in its head. The trigger-happy soldier who took the shot is none other than Sister Lightning, and Nightingale gives her a quick nod of approval for a job well done. Once the threat is neutralized, Nightingale decides it's time to head back. After a while, they finally reach the coast. Everyone gathers inside the balloon basket, worried sick about the prince. You see, traveling by balloon is slow, and even if they fly through the night, they won't reach the border town until noon the next day. With time running short, they decide to let Maggie and Lightning take the prince ahead first. While our sweet little demonic girl is ready to take on the task, Lightning seems a bit anxious. But she soon shakes off all of the disturbing thoughts and confidently assures everyone that they'll get the prince back in time. With that in mind, they strap the prince securely onto Maggie's back. Meanwhile, Nightingale reassures Lightning that the prince getting hurt wasn't their fault, because they weren't born for battle. With that, the two flying girls depart with the prince, leaving the others in the balloon. Anna also suggests they get moving as well, because she's certain those monsters might send another squadron after them, so they need to put as much distance as possible between them and the mountains. They'll set up camp when they find somewhere safe. Soraya is still anxious and worried, trying to figure out how the devils managed to find them. After all, the balloon and basket are camouflaged, so they shouldn't be detectable from 2,000 meters away, even with binoculars. Sylvie then reveals that she had seen a massive devil in the mist, and it was something like a giant black tower. It had a huge head, which was larger than its body, and countless eyes, all of which seemed to be locked onto her. She explains that hundreds of devils surged from underground as soon as they noticed the intruders, and the entire area was swarmed. Anna then adds that the monsters the devils were riding were strange as well. Their blood was blue, which makes it clear that they're completely different from the hybrids they've encountered during the months of demons. Soraya agrees, noting that the creatures they encountered seem more like actual devils. She points out that when Nightingale shot the first devil, it bled blue, confirming they're not just demons. Wendy expresses her relief that if Maggie hadn't transformed and saved Nightingale, they wouldn't have made it out alive. Nightingale adds that while Maggie was transforming, she saw her magic shift from a swirling mass to a pair of pale wings. Meanwhile, Lightning and Maggie are zooming down, both looking pretty exhausted. The little girl then asks if the prince is still hanging on, and Lightning responds that he's getting colder, but thankfully his pulse is still strong. She then tells Maggie to channel all their remaining magic to increase their speed. With a burst of energy, they accelerate to sonic speed. As they fly away, Lightning starts to reflect on the situation. She feels guilty, thinking that if she had left the balloon basket to distract the devils earlier, the prince might not have been injured. She's hard on herself, feeling like she's still a long way from being an outstanding explorer. She's also thinking about requesting a revolver for herself once they're out of this mess, and asking Nightingale to teach her some fighting techniques. Eventually, they reach the border town castle. As soon as they descend down, soldiers rush towards our girl, and Knight Carter is absolutely shocked to learn that Prince Roland is severely injured. Suddenly, the prince wakes up in a frantic state. He glances at his hand and is surprised to find it still there. As he looks around, he realizes he's back at the castle. He calls out for Knight Carter, but then he soon spots some of the witches sleeping down on the ground, and it looks like they must have dozed off while waiting for him to wake up. Quietly, he gets out of bed and peeks outside, and confirms that he really is back at the castle. Anna also wakes up and Roland quickly asks her about everyone. In response, she reassures him that everyone is back in town, and he's the only one who got injured. The prince breathes a sigh of relief upon hearing this, though he's feeling anxious because there is something different about Anna's tone. Out of nowhere, the girl hugs him tightly, calling him an idiot in a strangely affectionate way. Her repeated idiot in such a loving tone leaves the prince's nerves completely frazzled. He then feels a bit warm thinking about how there are people who care for him. He hugs her warmly in response, letting her know he's back and that she doesn't have to be so scared anymore. The other witches also begin to wake up, and they are all amazed to see the prince is out of his unconsciousness. Lightning wastes no time and launches herself at the prince, hugging him tightly, and soon the other little witches join in as well, creating a big, warm group hug. Nightingale is also relieved to see the prince safe and jumps over him like a little kid. The scene is filled with joy and affection, lighting up the entire room. Later that night, the prince sits alone in his room, reflecting on how he seriously underestimated the devils during the expedition. He hadn't anticipated their ability to detect the balloons from such a distance. Though the expedition proved to be quite dangerous, it provided invaluable intel. The devils are no longer just mysterious beings from the underworld, because they have their own civilization and are as culturally developed as humans. The prince probably has scribbled down his thoughts in a letter, which is probably meant for his sister, Princess Tilly. He mentions that the devils seem to have magic, which Nightingale confirmed. However, their magic method is totally different from witches, because they use some sort of external gizmo instead of activating it like witches do. Unfortunately, these are just educated guesses since the devil corpses sank into the sea, so he couldn't examine them closely. Sylvie pointed out that those odd stone towers the devils had might store a red liquid, and the red mist could be the gaseous form of that liquid. The mist's limited range might be why the devils haven't pushed past the Badlands. Based on what they've seen so far, it looks like the devils won't be a big threat to the border town anytime soon. Anna walks into the room, and the prince is a bit startled as she quietly locks the door behind her. He then curiously asks why she's there, and reminds her that he's already healed from his injuries, so there's no need to worry. Anna places her hand over his, making the prince blush like an idiot. She then takes his hand and places it over her chest, making it clear that she can't wait any longer and wants to make the most of their time together before anything else happens. She gets even closer despite her evident embarrassment, and the prince responds with a deep kiss to her lips. After sharing a tender moment, he gently lowers her onto the bed and positions himself on top of her. Before proceeding, the prince thinks about what to do next, considering that maybe some foreplay might be a good idea. But then he realizes he's got no real experience with it, having only ever seen a few of those racy magazines. So the prince decides to try a different approach. Maybe some smooth talking or cheeky banter will help set the mood before they dive into the main event. Just as he's trying to figure out what to say, Anna takes the initiative. She gently pushes him onto the bed and gets on top of him. He places his hands on her thighs, and she recalls the moment when he pushed her away and took that javelin in his shoulder, and asks if he didn't consider his own life at that moment. The prince responds that it was instinctive. Anna then reminds him that he's the future ruler of Grey Castle and the hope of all witches, implying that her own life doesn't matter as much in comparison. The prince insists that it wasn't about worth. He simply couldn't stand to see her die, and if he had more time to think about it, he'd still trade his life for hers without a second thought. As they lie there, Anna asks the prince to tell her more stories from his past, because she wants to know everything about him. The prince starts narrating, explaining that he used to live in a massive city, much bigger than Border Town. Roland then reveals that while he wasn't exactly exceptional, he was a bit smarter than average. He worked hard, so his teachers often praised him. But what they didn't know was that he was the one who kept drawing graffiti on the walls. Anna giggles, asking if that ever got him into trouble. In response, the prince explains that the teacher would just call his parents. His teachers kept changing as he got older, and he finished his studies with pretty typical scores, so he was always just a step behind the smartest kids. As Roland shares his story, Anna drifts off to sleep, and he realizes that she was just too exhausted to do anything more. Well, this much is not surprising, considering she was on high alert during the balloon ride back, keeping an eye out for devils or demons, and then she stayed by his side once they returned to the castle, which left the poor girl completely wiped out. Roland feels a bit bummed that they had to go through all that, but he's also relieved. At least they've got plenty of time ahead to figure out how to deal with these monstrous threats. The next day arrives with a fresh start. The first thing we see is Sylvie stretching heartily after what must have been a long, satisfying sleep. She greets Wendy with a cheerful good morning, and can't help but ask why Wendy's up so early. Wendy, with a hint of a smile, replies that she's getting older and doesn't need as much sleep anymore. Meanwhile, Nightingale, still in her nightdress, shamelessly mentions that she might need another nap later to recharge fully. Wendy asks Nightingale if she didn't sleep well, and Nightingale just says she had way too many dreams. Sylvie looks like she's about to spill something juicy about what Nightingale was doing last night, but she quickly goes silent when Nightingale shoots her a death glare. Wendy's curiosity gets the better of her, so she nudges Sylvie to keep talking, but poor Sylvie quickly backtracks and says Nightingale's sleep issues are probably just because she's been pushing herself too hard. Nightingale nods in agreement, saying her body can only handle so much. As Nightingale asks Wendy for help adjusting her bra, Sylvie reflects on how scary Prince Roland might be in some ways, but she finds him undeniably admirable. It's rare to see someone of his status who would go so far as to injure himself for a witch. There's no other explanation for his actions, as he truly stands with the witches, just like Miss Tilly. She is just overjoyed at the thought of Roland's dedication, and is thrilled that Princess Tilly has such a wonderful brother. Later, in the backyard, everyone gathers around to check out Maggie's new demonic bird form. They're all fascinated by her transformation and closely observe the changes. Sister Leaf is particularly amazed at the thought that these are the same kinds of flying monsters the devils were riding. She's relieved she didn't have to face any of these creatures herself in the Badlands, or she might not have made it out alive. Nightingale also acknowledges that their survival through the mountains was thanks to Maggie's evolved abilities. So, she turns to Maggie and promises her a bag of smoked fish every day, along with some extra honey, as a token of thanks for saving everyone's lives. When the prince hears Nightingale's plan to bring smoked fish to Maggie every day, he's in a bit of a tizzy. Those fish are meant for him, and he's not too thrilled about her taking them from the castle kitchen. Nonetheless, he approaches her and asks for a ride. Maggie takes off, soaring across the sea with both the prince and Nightingale on her back. The prince is having the time of his life because it's probably the closest he'll ever get to riding a dragon. He notices that she can fly at about 80 kilometers per hour with 2 passengers, which is slower than Lightning, but Maggie has the upper hand in stamina. Whenever Lightning needs to carry anything, she has to use more magic, and she loses altitude too. But Maggie just needs to transform, and altitude isn't a big factor in her magic consumption, and she only has to worry about her own strength. Nightingale also notes that Maggie's magic has grown tremendously, and she could easily become a powerhouse in the current Witch Union. She also estimates that Maggie can now transform 7 or 8 times a day with her current mana. The prince then decides it's time to drop down, and Maggie quickly begins her descent. As they get to lower altitude, the prince reveals that the building they're seeing currently is Witch Tower. We can also see all the witches standing on the balconies, and the prince points out that everyone has already picked their rooms. He tells Maggie that he knows she likes to sleep with Lightning, but he's still assigned her a bedroom, and she's free to decorate it however she wants. Our little demonic bird gets excited about this news and decides to make a beeline for her new room. Maggie's excited and rapid ascent starts scaring the prince half to death, so he quickly tells her to simmer down before they end up in the clouds. Meanwhile, we also see Evelyn is on the balcony, and she looks absolutely blown away by Maggie's new transformation. Suddenly, her mind then begins to drift back into past memory, where she saw how they poured the concrete into the building's frame. She finds it fascinating that if they mix it with pebbles, they could mold it into any shape or form, making concrete a versatile building material. Evelyn then walks inside her room and sits quietly, reflecting on how it's been a month since she arrived here. She doesn't feel like she's done much besides tasting wine for the prince. Even though he gave her her own room, she's starting to feel like she doesn't deserve all this, given how little she's contributed. She lays back on her bed like a lifeless body, reflecting on how she only got 5 points in the last exam. Miss Scroll didn't make everyone's scores public, but Evelyn found out after asking around. And now, she's feeling the weight of not measuring up. Evelyn thinks to herself how she's been practicing her handwriting every day after class, even getting help from Lily and Moon. Despite her efforts, she feels like she's just an average idiot with peanuts for brains. Suddenly, she hears her fellow witch, Candle, who excitedly bursts in to explain that the living room has an actual kitchen and even a weird room painted white, and she tells her friend to come with her to see it. But Evelyn looks too dejected to pay any attention to what her friend is saying. Candle notices her mood and gets worried, asking if she's feeling okay, and wonders if Evelyn is upset about having to sleep alone now. That's when Evelyn finally speaks up, reminding her friend that they've been living here for a month. In response, the little one agrees, but she is not sure what Evelyn is trying to say exactly. Evelyn goes on to remind her little friend about how Lotus is almost done with the new wall she was helping to prepare. Honey has been training a bunch of messenger birds, and Sylvie went with the prince to investigate the monsters. But on the other hand, she feels like she herself hasn't had anything to do, doesn't even have anything to practice, and has the worst test scores. All of this is making her wonder why the prince chose someone useless like her. After hearing all of this, Candle suggests her friend to ask Prince Roland directly about it. Evelyn is startled by this suggestion, but Candle reassures her that the prince is Miss Tilly's brother and has genuine intentions for the witches. She mentions that even Sylvie, who was once very critical of him, has softened and even complimented him once or twice yesterday. So, she encourages her to talk to the prince, assuring her that he won't be harsh or chew her out for speaking with him personally. Eventually, Evelyn decides to go talk to Prince Roland. We are back in the castle, where we see the old man Barov, asking the prince why he's specifically recruiting women for the starch production. In response, Roland explains that women are generally more careful and that he wants more women working instead of staying at home. He also tells Barov that once the next exam ends, he will be in charge of recruiting female apprentices for the city hall. Barov is surprised to hear this, and points out there is no example of women as labor in the past, and further highlights that the other apprentices are just as careful as well. The prince explains that if there's no existing model, they'll have to create one, because adding women to the workforce is the easiest way to expand the labor force. The prince also assigns Barov the task of changing people's attitudes about women working. Besides, he points out that given the fat paycheck every woman is going to receive, he is sure that they'll gradually step up to the job. Suddenly, Nightingale pops back into the office and asks the prince if this starch stuff is something delicious he's planning to make. The prince shakes his head with no, and says it's not just food, but it does have a pretty neat byproduct. He explains that if you mix wheat flour with water and knead it until the water turns completely white, then replace the water, you're left with a sticky ball of gluten. This gluten can be deep-fried or stir-fried, making it soft and bouncy, and then you can glaze it with honey or mix it with spices. All of that sounds delicious, and it seems like Nightingale has already started drooling just hearing about it. The prince decides it's probably best to stop talking before she gets even more excited. In his head, the prince thinks about how processed flour water becomes starch, which is a crucial ingredient in explosives. Since he hasn't started producing glycerin yet, TNT is off the table for now. But starch is the easiest explosive to manufacture, and it's not very sensitive, so it can't be ignited by fire and needs a detonator, but it's actually stronger than TNT. The prince is confident that once his alchemists manage to create TNT, he'll be one step closer to shaking Timothy's throne. While the prince is dreaming of the grand explosions he'll be able to create with starch, Nightingale is also drooling over the thought of fried and roasted gluten once starch production begins. Both of them are lost in their thoughts, having the time of their lives thinking about their interests, when suddenly, Evelyn opens the office door anxiously and walks in. Nightingale quickly disappears, and the prince asks Evelyn the reason for her visit. The girl nervously responds that she has a question to ask. The prince assumes she might bring up the same old question about why he tolerates witches, but he brushes off the thought and happily encourages her to ask. Evelyn stammers out of nervousness and asks why he picked her for the position, since her abilities aren't as useful as Sylvie's, and she's nowhere close to Lotus or Honey. She mentions that if he just wanted someone to taste different wines and alcohol, he could have easily hired a connoisseur. The prince quickly figures out what Evelyn's thinking and asks her how she feels about the alcohol he's given her. Evelyn is a bit puzzled at first, but mentions that while it was too strong at first, she's gotten used to it. The prince then rummages through the bookshelf and pulls out a bottle of alcohol. Evelyn further continues and adds that the cocktails with ice, juice, and sugar were really delicious. But she also points out that her family's pub only sold cheap wine and crude beer, so she doesn't really know what the wealthy prefer. After pouring the beer into a glass, the prince asks if she can transform it into vodka. Evelyn agrees and quickly uses her abilities on the liquid. As expected, the color of the beer starts to change, and the prince takes a quick taste and confirms that this is exactly what he was looking for, which is precisely why he hired her. The prince mentions he's planning to open an ethanol factory, but quickly corrects himself, saying instead he's opening a brewery, and Evelyn will be the professional winemaker. Well, Evelyn looks unsure about her abilities and remains silent. Meanwhile, back with Garcia Wimbledon, a man arrives in her chamber asking for her help and justice. He explains that his territory has not been fully attacked by heretics yet, but his son died in the hands of their followers, while he was protecting the previous queen, and now the rebels are hiding in the mountains. He wants revenge and asks Garcia for alchemy products that can blow open city gates. He promises that if she helps him out, he'll fully support her, and the entire Silver Heron family will follow her as well. Garcia smirks while thinking to herself that Duke Bode is quite influential. If she appoints him as the prime minister and unifies the remaining elites, it'll make her accusation of betrayal much easier. She quickly decides to help him, saying she likes the proposal, but can't just hand everything over. She assures him that she'll have alchemists assist him when needed. The Duke is pleased by her generosity, and walks off happily. Soon after, Garcia's knight appears with a glass of beer and offers it to her. He notes that with all the elites in her palm, she could dominate the entire kingdom even without the Wolfheart King's help. Garcia agrees, and just then, the knight presents a letter from the Wolfheart King. She opens it quickly, and the knight anxiously asks if it's bad news. Garcia reads the letter and grimly states that the church has sent more troops. They're coming for Wolfheart City, and they've breached many perimeters. The knight is stunned by the news and quickly asks why the church is launching an attack even though the months of demons are almost upon them. Garcia is also startled to hear this news, noting that she didn't expect the church to act so quickly. If they had waited until next spring, she would have been better prepared. Now, they're not giving her a chance to recover, and if she ignores the Wolfheart King's call for help, they'll destroy him. This means she won't be able to hold them off for long either. However, Garcia sees this as a good opportunity. If many of the church's troops are defeated at Wolfheart and demons swarm Hermes in the Holy City, it could spell the end of the church. She tells her knight to mobilize the Black Flag soldiers because this year, they'll be spending the winter at Wolfheart. Back in Border Town, we see an air balloon up in the sky. On the ground, Carter is blown away by the news that the prince is about to bomb the capital with hot air balloons from 2,000 meters. While observing the balloon through binoculars, the prince says that as long as they manage the targeting, it's totally doable. He notes that Theo's letter mentioned Timothy is forcing more people to join his forces, so he is probably using the same strategy of using Church's pills. Iron Axe excitedly agrees, adding that as long as they blow Timothy's head by nuking the shit out of him, he is definitely going to get screwed for sure. The prince is hoping for just that and mentions he's been testing bombs for a week, so fingers crossed it works. Meanwhile, Carter can be seen crying, and he is yapping about how perimeters and defenses are useless against this balloon, and all their military tactics go out the window when tons of bombs are raining from the sky. When the bomb finally drops and detonates, it covers a massive area with a cloud of fire upon impact. The prince and his subordinates are practically dancing with joy, thrilled to see it worked so well. The prince then happily reveals to us that this successful test means Operation Eastern Wind 001 is all set to roll. It looks like the next episode is going to be packed with explosions. Drop a comment about what part of the video you enjoyed the most. As for me, I'm totally pumped to learn more about these devils and their origin, and I can't wait to see how the prince plans to fight them. I'm kind of hoping he considers dropping one of these on that devil's village too.